Hi, my name is Travis Shinglebecker, and I'm a director at Aperio Philanthropy. Aperio is a nonprofit consulting firm with a vision for a world in which everyone can thrive. We exist to unleash the power of communities to drive change by dramatically expanding resources for nonprofits. Day to day, we work alongside community leaders and fundraisers to develop simpler, faster, and smarter ways to generate the revenue for nonprofit missions. Our client services provide strategic advisory, hands-on support, and embedded fundraisers to organizations nationwide. We've enjoyed getting to host a three-part series this summer, the Relationship-Based Fundraising Toolbox, where we have been going back to the basics of relationship-based fundraising. Today's webinar will be the third and final part of this series, and will focus on creating a roadmap to your fundraising goal. As questions come up, please submit them via the Q&A tool, and they will be addressed at the end of today's session. Before the end of the week, we will send you a recording of today's webinar alongside a path to goal spreadsheet template. It is my pleasure to now kick it over to our facilitators for today, Kelly Bronig and Tony Koch.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you everyone for joining us today. During the last session, we focused on donor engagement planning, which is creating tactical steps on how to engage all of your donors. And this week is the final session of our summer series where we'll be discussing creating a roadmap to your goal with a focus on portfolio and one-to-one relationship management to achieve your revenue goals by end of year. Before we get started, just a little bit about us. Aperio is a fundraising consulting firm created by a group of fundraisers who believe that nonprofits can do more than survive, but rather they can thrive. We believe that your mission, your donors, and your team all have more potential, and we are here to make it simple for you all to realize that potential. As you'll hear today, our passion is for going beyond great ideas. We know that the challenge is less often what to do, but rather how to get it done amongst competing priorities. In creating our firm, we've listened, learned, and distilled what works best into a clear roadmap that any nonprofit can follow. The building blocks of that roadmap are your people, a clear business model, and of course, a culture of philanthropy. We work alongside organizations large and small to implement this roadmap and unlock new fundraising potential. My name is Kelly Bronig. I am a senior director here at Aperio Philanthropy. My career has been focused on leading strategy in the development operations space for many nonprofit organizations. I am especially passionate about helping organizations level up their operations and implementing efficiencies to create a solid foundation for their development teams and to better serve their missions. I am here today with my colleague, Tony Koch. Tony, I'll kick it to you for a quick introduction.
Thanks, Kelly. Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Koch, and I'm a senior director here at Aperio. I have built a career in relationship management and fundraising for international nonprofit organizations of varying sizes and stages. And at Aperio, I specialize in helping smaller or newer organizations create a strong foundation for sustainable fundraising growth.
Today, we're going to cover how to create a path to your goal by using reverse engineering. We will walk through building a short list of priority donors. Then we'll detail how to design ask plans for those donors. And finally, what it will take to work those plans that we've created. Let's start by talking a little bit about the word goal and all the weight that it holds for us as fundraisers. On one hand, many of us, myself included, describe ourselves as goal-oriented. We see goals and aspiring to reach those goals as a good thing. We want to see our organizations grow and thrive. On the other hand, goal is a loaded word. It means a big, hairy number. Often it means a big, hairy number that someone else chose for us. It means the clock resetting at the beginning of each fiscal year. It means starting back at square one. And sometimes it means the difference between programs moving forward, impact being achieved, and our colleagues' jobs continuing. That is a lot of pressure. It's no wonder that we have complicated feelings about goals, especially big, hairy ones. We have all come to long for goals that are achievable. Achievable based on the donors that we have, based on the momentum that we have, based on our team size, and based on our bandwidth. And so many fundraisers tell us, I have this goal. I don't know where it came from, and I don't think it's achievable. Probably the biggest learning that I've had in my career is this. I am the one who makes the goal achievable. I've started shifting the question from, is this goal achievable, to what would it take to actually make this goal achievable? By shifting our focus from, is this goal achievable, to what would make it achievable, we free ourselves to get going. We're able to get started. We give ourselves the agency needed to proactively work on figuring it out. This goal will become achievable through what efforts, by whom, by when, and using what resources. The way I like to think about it is similar to a road trip. So I live in Kansas City. Let's say that I need to get to Seattle by next week to see a friend. I could panic, just get in the car and go, driving in the direction that I think makes the most sense, going one step at a time. I could probably get there eventually, but it would be very difficult to get there in time, and it would be extremely stressful. I would also waste a ton of time, energy, and frankly, gas taking wrong turns. If I were my friend, I would not count on me arriving, and certainly not count on me arriving in time. If instead I spent a little time up front mapping out my plan, getting my car ready and figuring out what roads to take, where to stop, where to stay overnight, I'm going to have a lot of an easier time. I'm much more likely to get there in time, much more likely to be able to deal with the inevitable hiccups and emergencies, and much less likely to waste time and gas. It will also be a lot less stressful. And in this case, my friend can count on me being there. Similarly, when we have our revenue goal and all we have is the destination, we need to figure out the route to get there and do the necessary preparations in order to get there efficiently and effectively. And then we need to use our plan. Only then can an organization count on us to deliver the revenue that is needed for the mission. You can also think of your job as building a new puzzle every year. We have all the pieces, a lot of donors, stories, plenty of work hours, as we all know. And one way to build a puzzle is just to start fiddling with pieces randomly to see if you can figure out how any of them fit together. That's chaos. We've all been there. Most of us develop some sort of system. We sort by the edges versus the middle. We group the colors together. We decide what section to work on first. Similarly, most of us already have all of the assets we need to reach our goals, even lofty stretch goals. The question isn't what we need to do it, it's how we put all of those assets to work. How are we using them systematically to build towards the complete picture in the end? Working without a plan is chaotic and cluttered and frustrating. Taking a systematic approach is much more effective. And even when it's hard work, at least that work is building up to something. On today's webinar, we are going to walk you through the 4 steps in making your goal achievable, really taking the reins into your hands and getting going. This is the equivalent of planning your road trip and then hitting the road, or getting your puzzle pieces organized and then getting to the building of the puzzle. Those 4 steps are to reverse engineer the path to your goal, including some specific numbers or metrics that you can use to keep on track. then creating a short list of relationships to focus on or a portfolio, to then plan the work for that short list, and then finally work the plan, keeping pace with the metrics that you've just set for yourself. Reverse engineering the path to your goal starts by knowing what your goal is and understanding the donors in your organization's database or in your own specific portfolio. I find that having a visual element helps to make the big goal more manageable. It breaks it into pieces that are a bit more bite-sized. This is where donor pyramids or gift tables will come in handy. And mentioning a donor pyramid, it's a visual roadmap to your goal that breaks out the number of donors needed at each giving level. We'll get into that a little more specifically here soon. Creating a pyramid or gift table will allow you to sort and prioritize donors by ask amount, establish the number of asks you'll need to make in order to reach your goal. It will allow you to determine the number of donors you'll need to engage to achieve your goal. It demonstrates to your team, yourself, your leadership and board what it will take to meet the goal that's been set. And it helps identify whether any additional resources or support are going to be needed in order to achieve that goal that you all have set. Here you can see a sample gift table. In this example, the team has a goal of raising 2.5 million. You can see that in the bottom right-hand corner. That totals up everything. You can see that they're aiming for a largest gift at the very top row of 500,000 towards that goal, and that would be one $500,000 gift. The middle range is looking for about 8 gifts that fall within the 50,000 to 99,000 level. And those 8 gifts should total 400,000 of the goal. And then at the bottom of the table with the lowest dollar amounts, we're looking at gifts under $10,000 that collectively add up to $250,000 of that goal. And in this example, we'll need 44 major gifts to hit that $2.5 million goal. When you're working on your gift table, it's important to remember that the lower you go on the gift table, the more gifts you will need to reach the same number. In this example, we've created a different path to the same goal, which doesn't have that lead gift of 500,000 and relies more on gifts under $100,000. In this example, the team needs to raise 75 gifts or 30 more gifts or 74% more gifts than in the prior example. That is a lot more work. The key in doing this work is to stay realistic in your spread, referring to prior years as guidance while setting some stretch goals that help your team move up the gift table a bit. We're focusing on more of the major gifts that will set you up to focus your time on the highest potential opportunities. Less is more if you're stretched thin, as we all know. So a few technical tips here. Start by making your gift table for last year. Use the real number of gifts and the real dollar amount provided in the chart. Adjust the gift ranges to make sense for your organization. Keep it simple by not going too low down. Group the small gifts all together. Look at how to determine how you want to grow your plan this year. Look at the biggest gifts very carefully to determine if they are repeatable or if you'll need to replace them. Were they one-time large dollar gifts in order to achieve the same gift table? Or maybe you want to add a new stretch level for a top gift. For your goal gift table, use the bottom of the range in the math in the revenue column to be conservative. Once we have the number of gifts we need, we can reverse engineer the rest of the path to that goal. The way we do this is by thinking through what it will take to receive every single gift. First, we know that not every person that we ask to give will give, or will give when or at the level that we asked of them. That means that to be sure we receive that gift in our gift table of 100,000, we have to ask at least 3 people for $100,000. Next, we know that an ask is a conversation. We have to learn about the donor. We need to help them learn about the opportunity with our organization. We have to work through the ask. Even for a renewal, there is more to explore with the donor. It doesn't end with that first opportunity. That means that for every ask we make, whether it results in a gift or not, we have to meet with the donor multiple times. On average, we're looking at about 3 meetings per ask. These days, a meeting could be a visit in somebody's home. It could be a Zoom call. It could even be a pre-scheduled phone call where we have time to really connect with the prospective donor. But regardless, it's multiple conversations that we are having with the same donor each time. And then, of course, we all know that meetings don't just materialize. It takes work to establish rapport with a donor, to coordinate that meeting, to follow up from that meeting, to share updates in between meetings. That is a lot of emails, phone calls, and maybe even some snail mail, like a handwritten note from time to time. At a minimum, every donor that you plan to ask this year should receive a personalized touch point from you at least once a month. These are touch points over and above anything that they're receiving from your direct response. Think mass emails, mass mail, or event invitations, something separate from those. These are real personalized touch points. When you're just getting to know someone, you'll need to do more intensive outreach with 5 to 10 touch points in a 6 to 8 week time period. As you get to know donors, you'll adjust that frequency, of course, communicating more with some donors, less with others, depending on their preferences. The point is that we can assume a lot of touch points per person we want to ask, and 12 per year is a good average to start with. Okay, so let's pull everything just shared together. Here you can see our gift table again. We have $2.5 million goal, and we've mapped out how many gifts we want to raise at each level in order to hit that goal. That tells us that we need 45 major gifts. To get those 45 gifts, we know that we need to ask at least 3 times the number of people, because not everyone will say yes. This is called a coverage ratio. That means we need to make 135 asks. That also means we need at least 135 donors in our portfolio, probably about 1.5 times that many, because we're not going to be able to ask everyone in our portfolio. We'll talk more about that in our next section. Our 135 asks will require an average of 3 meetings each, which means we're aiming to have 405 donor meetings this year. And our 135 asks also means we have to stay in touch with those people between meetings, at least an average of once per month, meaning we need to make 1,620 per year. And just to make this point again, there is no one path to a goal. If we think that our most realistic path to 2.5 million is through smaller gifts, we can build that out. We just have to make sure we have the bandwidth for all of that extra work. We need to consider our team. Here's the example again without that 500K lead gift and more focus on $25,000 and $10,000 gifts. Instead of 45 gifts, we need 75. So that flows through to our path to goal. We now need to make at least 225 asks, have 675 meetings, and do 2,700 touch points this year. Again, if this is the path, that's great. We now just have a clear picture of the work ahead of us, and we can plan accordingly. At this point, you are probably thinking, yikes, that is a lot. And it's true. When you look at a whole goal and all of the work involved as one major chunk, it is overwhelming. But here's where the exciting part comes in. We can break this down into bite-sized chunks that make our big, hairy goal very achievable. Here you can see those metrics again from our gift table. We calculated that in order to raise 2.5 million, we need 45 gifts, which will take 135 asks, 405 meetings, and 1,620 touch points. To break this down, we now look at what this will take by month, and then even by week. We're making this actionable. Now our team has a really clear picture. If we keep pace with this throughout the year, we can achieve our goal with lots of cushion, given the reality that we're not going to get a yes from everyone all of the time. The last step in this process is then to assign out these metrics across our team and determine how we're going to hold one another accountable.
So the next step in this process is to create a short list. Now that we know how we're going to get to our goal, we have to determine who we're going to ask. In other words, we need to make a clear list of prospective donors to ask for a major gift this year. Understanding who makes up your donor base is essential to creating a fundraising plan that effectively reaches your supporters and encourages them to give more and more frequently. So let's dig into the important question: who are we going to ask? Starting with the numbers, in the scenario we've been exploring, we calculated that we needed to make 135 asks to be sure we can bring in 45 gifts. Now we have to factor in that we will not be able to ask every prospective donor that we work with. Some donors will just be tough to reach, or maybe we will reach them and realize through conversation that it's not the right time to ask for a major gift. When creating portfolios, we suggest identifying at least 1.5 times the number of prospective donors that you need to ask. In this example, that would mean identifying 205 prospective donors for the team's portfolios. Again, we will assign these out to a specific member of the team so that we can divide up the work. That shortlist should be made up of individuals and institutions with capacity to give large gifts. Any donor-facing fundraisers should ideally spend about 80% of their time building relationships with their personal portfolio of prospective supporters, meaning those with high philanthropic potential. When selecting donors for your portfolio, focus on future potential. For setting up portfolios, we use the Capacity Plus rule. We talked about this in detail during the first session in this summer series, but here's a quick recap. Everyone in a portfolio should have verified or suspected financial capacity to give at the major gifts level. Keep in mind that wealth screening and research can only tell you so much. Use the information you have as a starting point, but don't get stuck here. The key thing to remember is that capacity alone is not enough. We see high capacity folks all over the country who are not philanthropic. And just because someone is philanthropic doesn't mean that our mission will resonate. So we're looking for someone who is high capacity and shows some other sign that we can build a relationship with them and at least get to a conversation about investing in our vision and mission. Here are some signs of growth potential. A donor might be aligned with your values or have a clear understanding of your mission. Possibly they give to organizations who are similar to yours or in the same cause area. Maybe they've given to you before, or they've demonstrated interest by volunteering with you or attending one of your events. Lastly, remember that your shortlist could include all kinds of donors, including current active donors, lapsed donors, and potential donors. When assigning out donors, it's important to keep bandwidth in mind. Here are our recommendations. CEOs or executive directors have an important role to play in engaging top donors, but it's not their responsibility to manage a full portfolio. Identify select donors who deserve that level of relationship management and plan to support your CEO or ED behind the scenes to ensure a plan is in place for each of these donors. More on that shortly. For leaders of development, think CDOs, you are looking at managing a smaller portfolio, likely made up mostly of principal or leadership donors and prospects. For full-time relationship managers, we recommend portfolios of 75 to 150. If you're managing companies, institutions, or a mix of those and individuals, it will likely be on the smaller end of this range. Remember, portfolios that are too big often means donors get ignored or planned touch points don't get out on time. Instead, consider making a wish list or priority portfolio within your middle giving segment. The next step in the plan is to plan the work. Now it's time to map out an ask plan for each donor on your shortlist. Asks are at the heart of relationship-based fundraising. If you think about the donor cycle, we tend to use words like cultivation, stewardship, solicitation. Putting this jargon aside, what we're really trying to do is spark a conversation, ask questions, and interest and inspire donors so that the ask becomes the natural next step in that conversation. At Aperio, we think about ask planning as defining the next ideal destination for each relationship with a prospective donor in your portfolio. Some questions we should ask ourselves when doing ask planning include: how much do you aim to ask for? By when do you aim to make the ask? What is the most likely gift amount? What is the most likely gift to date? And what is the probability of getting a gift? Let's dig into these a little deeper. An ask plan has 4 key elements. First, let's talk about amounts. The planned ask amount is the amount that you plan to ask for. Be bold in your ask, but don't pull a number out of thin air. It should be based on what you know about the donor's giving history, their capacity, and any other known factors that might influence their giving this year. The expected gift amount is the amount that you think you will receive. Be realistic, consider last year's giving history, the relationship status, and how engaged they are in your mission, demonstrated by things like volunteerism or event attendance. This should be a conservative guesstimate, and it can absolutely be 0. Earlier, we talked about coverage ratio related to the number of prospects or asks at each gift level. This was 3 to 5 times. We also want to have a coverage ratio in our ask amount. So the total ask amount should be 3 to 5 times your goal, and the expected gift amount should be 1 to 2 times your goal. In order for this to be true across the organization's pipeline, it has to be true for the asks you're planning for your specific portfolio. So here's an example. Maybe you have a donor who has only ever given to you an annual contribution of $20,000. Your goal might be to simply renew this gift, but this year you have a strong case to make for an increased gift, and you know this donor has capacity based on their giving to other similar organizations. Your planned ask amount might be $100,000 over 2 years. This would be a significant jump, and you might not be sure it will come through, but you think some increase is possible, so you might make your expected gift amount for this year $30,000. We have coverage ratios because we know that not every ask will be made, not every donor will say yes, and not every gift will be as big as expected. Next, we have our dates. The planned ask date is very obviously the date you plan to make your ask. This should be around 3 months before you expect to receive the gift. And the expected gift date, also obvious when you expect the donor to make their next gift. This could be based on last year's gifts and/or conversations where possible. A mistake we often see fundraisers make is not making asks well enough in advance of when a donor plans to make their gift. We also tend to assume that gifts will be made at the end of the year and plan all of our asks for October or November. If you manage a 150 donor portfolio, it will be nearly impossible for you to make all of your asks in 1 month of the year, so try to spread them out. Ideally, your ask plans should live in your CRM, but you can also start with a simple spreadsheet like the one shown. If you are going to use your CRM, you may still want to plan asks in a spreadsheet first and then upload them just to make review easier. If you are going to work with a spreadsheet as your tool throughout the year, also add the columns you see here for stage, meaning where you are in the ask, like just getting started, ask made, verbal commitment received, the actual ask amount, meaning what you actually asked for in order to help compare to your original plan, the actual ask date, when you actually made the ask, the received or pledged amount, the gift you received from your ask to be compared to the expected gift amount, and the received or pledged date, meaning when you actually received the gift. Whether you use your CRM or a tracker, the key here is to plan asks for all renewals and upgrades in your portfolios. Plan enough asks to cover your gift table plan. In our example, that would be 135. Fill out all the plan information, the columns with the stars here, even if you don't have the full information. And don't be afraid to stretch. So think big and be bold in those asks. Some other tips as you do this work: each relationship manager should make their own ask plan themselves. If you're feeling stuck, talk through asks with colleagues and leadership, and check the number of asks per month so that they're reasonable, and especially watch year end. The last step in this process is to work the plan. If the ask is your destination, then having a moves management plan is your route. It's how you're going to get to your ask. Moves management is more fundraising jargon for the steps you are going to take to engage donors in your mission and get them closer to an ask. In short, doing what you say you're going to do when you're going to do it. At Aperio, we talk a lot about keeping a 30, 60, 90-day line of sight on work. Being able to look about 3 months out is key to managing all of the touch points and ask plans to reach your goal. The donor engagement plan we talked about 2 weeks ago helps create that baseline experience for all of your donors, with the opportunity to layer on one-to-one touch points for personalized relationship management. Your CRM's activity, action, or task management functions will help you keep track of the day-to-day. When it comes to working your plan, look ahead to the next 90 days for both upcoming asks you have planned and gifts you expect to receive. We are all prone to falling behind on our work. Sometimes staff turns over, or disasters strike, or life just happens and we don't get to everything on our long list of things to do. Some overdue asks and expected gifts are inevitable. Prioritize reaching out to donors to schedule meetings for those asks and thanking donors for gifts once they have been received. When it comes to overdue asks or expected gifts, it's important to keep that plan updated. This means updating due dates to reflect a new, more realistic time frame for you to activate that plan. Use your colleagues as thought and accountability partners in getting this work done. There are lots of ways to engage with donors, both on your own or with help from coworkers. On your own, you can see these are obvious ways that you can and likely do engage donors in your mission, acknowledge and recognize their gifts, and share about gift impact. These touch points or moves should happen throughout the year to keep donors aware of and excited by the work that you're doing, so that when it comes time to make the ask, it feels like the natural next step. Remember, we're aiming to do about 1 of these per month with each donor in our portfolio. You don't have to do this work only by yourself. In fact, for larger donors, the more you can lean on colleagues to help deepen that relationship with the organization, the better. If you joined our donor engagement planning conversation 2 weeks ago, you might recall that operationalizing ways that non-relationship managers can play a role in donor engagement is key to everyone knowing their role in playing it and ensuring you can provide an elevated experience for select donors. In addition to the engagement plan, Depending on the size and structure of your development team, you might have more formal operating procedures for engaging leadership and board in donor relationships. The biggest takeaway here is that moves or next steps don't have to be complicated to be meaningful. In fact, the simple moves like picking up the phone and calling your donors are the ones that tend to have the greatest impact. In order to make this plan truly workable, we recommend always having at least one next step planned for every donor in your portfolio. For your top donors in your portfolio, meaning those with the greatest potential to grow their giving, you might have 2 or 3 next steps planned, especially if they involve collaborating with colleagues. Ideally, this next step lives in your CRM and is attached to the donor record. As you would with any moves, keep on top of your next steps daily. Add them in when needed and mark complete after you make the call or send the email. If you don't have a CRM, it's a good idea to use a shared spreadsheet to track this information amongst all relationship managers. In order to always have one open next step, this usually means that every time you complete an action, you'll create a new one. For example, let's say you have an open task to email a donor in your portfolio to request a meeting. Once you send that email, it's a good idea to create a new task to follow up with them on that meeting request in a few days if you haven't heard back. When we're managing large portfolios and tracking next steps for up to 150 donors at a time, it becomes impossible to keep all of that information in our heads. Rely on your CRM to hold this information. Log in at the start of your workday and enter all moves in real time to keep things up to date. When it comes to your moves management plan, think about steps related to meetings and outreach. Start by reviewing recently completed meetings and meetings you have coming up in the next week. For outreach, look ahead to the next week and anything that might be overdue. Regarding meetings, make sure everything you promised to that donor is logged as a next step or completed. Get out any thank you for meeting with me emails, confirming those next steps, or sharing any promised materials. For upcoming meetings, make sure you prepare. Review the donor's giving history with your organization and any relevant background or research you have available or can conduct yourself. Identify your goals for the meeting and have an agenda or plan for the flow of the meeting, including some questions that you'd like to ask or talking points you'd like to share. This is a great opportunity to collaborate with other colleagues. Looking ahead at outreach, does it still make sense to do everything as you had planned it? Adjust activities if needed and use this as an opportunity to get ahead if possible. For those tasks that are overdue, block time to catch up. I find time blocking in general to be a super helpful tactic for getting work done, especially when it comes to outreach. Lastly, but certainly not least, update all elements of your plan as you go. Review and update ask plans after every interaction with a donor, and review your entire list of open asks at least once per month. As you receive gifts, be sure to update the actual gift amounts and dates. Doing this work in real time in your CRM helps you have a system that works for you, not you working for a system. So to recap, the 4 steps to creating a path to your goal are reverse engineer the path to your goal, including some specific numbers or metrics that you can use to keep on track. Create a short list of relationships to focus on or a portfolio. Plan the work for that short list and work the plan, keeping pace with the metrics you've set for yourself. The main thing to remember is that a lot of this comes down to mindset and organization. Every goal is overwhelming if we tackle it without a plan. Take a breath, break it down, plan the work, and then work the plan.
Just a few quick takeaways of everything that we covered today with you all. We know that ask planning is important to understand what your destination is, what your goal ultimately is. Moves management is key to ensure that you are reaching that destination. And finally, as we all say so many times, planning the work and working the plan is how we are successful for tracking progress towards goal and ultimately reaching them.
All right. Well, great. Thank you so much, Kelly and Tony, for leading us through the presentation. And I know we just have a lot of questions that came through in the Q&A tool. So for any of y'all who joined after the introduction, I encourage you all to please use the Q&A tool to submit any questions that you have that'll bring us through the end of today's session. So our first question that came in, this I'll direct to Tony, is what are some factors that might influence your planned ask amount other than past giving and capacity?
Great question. Lots of things could come into play here. Generally, I'd recommend thinking about things that could influence your own spending or giving. So a donor could have bought a bigger house or have kids going off to college and have less disposable income. Or on the flip side, maybe they recently inherited money or sold a business. Other personal life events like marriage or divorce can mean changes to giving behavior. So getting to know your donors on this level helps as you think about the ask amount that will be most appropriate for them at that time.
Great. And then this other one I think is likely more so for Tony. So what if there is no last year to determine the path to goal? Meaning we're a new organization. Where do we start?
Yeah, another great question. So in this situation, I would think about the goal that you have from a revenue perspective. So even though you don't have a donor base to work of in terms of building that gift table, you could make a general gift table based on the amount of money that you need to raise. I also encourage organizations just starting out to maybe have 2 scenarios for that goal. So a really like bare minimum, this is the minimum amount that we need to raise in order to achieve the impact that we've set out to achieve this year. And then a stretch budget or goal that's a little bit more visionary. So as you meet with donors who are really excited to come alongside you, think of them like more as like seed funding type investors in your mission. They might be willing to explore a budget scenario or a goal scenario with you that is a little bit more visionary and even goes beyond what you think you could do if you had just the minimum amount.
Great. So this next one I'll put over to Kelly is, what if the fields for the essential elements of an ask plan don't exist in my CRM?
Okay. So we are often seeing CRMs that don't have those essential fields needed right off the bat, out of the box from the software company. If you have the ability, you'll want to add in custom fields to ensure that you're capturing the following: the planned ask amount, expected gift amount, planned ask date, and expected gift date. It's crucial to capture this information to plan your work effectively and then be able to report on that data when reflecting on the year. And alternatively, if your CRM doesn't have customization capabilities, or you're not quite operating in a CRM yet and you're still in spreadsheets, we have the opportunity to track this information outside of the CRM, or we can talk about how you're using those existing date fields. Happy to have a discussion with you on that.
This next one I'll put to the 2 of you. So wondering whether the number of touch points per targeted person are not nagging to someone.
I love this question. I'd say the short answer from my perspective is that people are busy. I don't know about you all, but I can barely keep up with my personal inbox, let alone my work inbox. So I would need to be nudged a few times, even for something that I care greatly about. If you're really looking to get a meeting with me or have a conversation, plus what we're recommending, aside from that initial getting to know someone outreach, is really a once per month kind of touch point or check-in to make sure that they're staying abreast of your mission and your impact, as well as you giving them opportunities to kind of wave back. I'd say ultimately, if somebody doesn't want to hear from you, they will let you know, in which case that's also great, because this is like a sales phrase, but like yeses are great, nos are great. It's the maybes that will kill you. So if you want to like keep that pace of outreach, I'd say at the very least, you hope to get the yeses and the nos sorted out through that pace. I don't know if Kelly, you have anything to add?
I am on track with you.
Great.
Okay, the next one I'll put to the both of you again. So does the spreadsheet template you discussed work for organizations as well as corporations in addition to individual donors? Or do you recommend tracking those funders differently?
Tony, I'll let you take this one.
Yes, so it does. You can insert all of the gifts that you expect to receive, regardless of donor type, into the spreadsheet. What I would recommend, and Kelly, you can elaborate on this, would be having a field within your CRM where you're tracking donor type so that you can have a better understanding of the percentage of revenue that's coming from each of those channels. But yes, you can, the short answer is yes, you can use the spreadsheet to track all gifts by donor type.
And to Tony's point, ultimately, we want to be able to report and segment your donors in your database based on donor type and a myriad of other things. Donor type is one of the key pieces we need to make sure we're tracking. And that means when you have people doing gift entry or data entry, when they're creating a new donor, sometimes it will default to individual or organization. Just make sure there's an extra layer of consideration going there to make sure that they are marked appropriately.
Great. This next one I'll give over to Kelly as well, sticking on the CRM side. So this is a lot of data to keep track of. Who should be responsible for entering all this data into the CRM?
Yeah, we're talking thousands of touch points in some of those scenarios. There are a few things to take into consideration here. I'd want to know, do you have a development operations staff member or team at your organization? How many relationship managers are on your team? Are you a one-person shop? Ultimately, I want to see that all of your portfolio holders are entering their own tasks, actions, asks. But that said, depending on how you're doing your planning, if there's a tremendous volume of tasks and asks right off the bat that you all have documented initially, say, here are all of the touch points that I've done in the past 6 months, and it's in a spreadsheet, and you do have a DevOps team member, that can fall to them at the beginning. After that initial import, I want to see portfolio holders engaging with the CRM, engaging directly with those donors in their portfolio to keep their own tasks and asks up to date. It keeps them very familiarized with the information that's in the database.
Okay, so this next one I'll give over to Tony. So do you have any suggestions on how to ask for meetings?
Yeah. So if you're reaching out to a cold prospect, I'd be sure you're providing them with a short introduction to your organization, like 1, max 2 sentences, and why you're reaching out to them, ideally referencing their connection to your mission or similar organizations that they've supported in the past. And then ground your meeting request in a desire to get to know them and their connection to the community that you're serving. If you're reaching out to a current donor or a warmer prospect, make sure you lead with a more personal anecdote, like, hope you all had a great summer, like, did your kids enjoy camp, something like that, and then still let them know why you're reaching out. Maybe you have an exciting update to share, or you'd like their advice on a piece of collateral that you've created. If you do want to meet with them about their gift this year, be really clear about that so they know what to expect going into a meeting. Plus, if you are clear and they accept the meeting, then you're already off to a great start. The last thing I'd say is if email isn't working, don't be afraid to pick up the phone to request that meeting.
A zoomed out question for Kelly. So what are the best CRMs from your perspective?
Oh, that's a big question. That depends on so many different things, size of your organization, How are you fundraising? How much time are you spending on grants? How robust is your events program? It really depends. How much time internally amongst your staff will you have committed to the CRM that you're going to choose? I would love to have a conversation with you and kind of discuss what the pros and cons would be. What I will say is that there are CRMs for organizations of all sizes and all types that are going to work about 95% of what you need them to, and just keep that realistic mindset there. Implementation is a long one, and not everything is going to have 100% of the capabilities that you need, but there's something out there that's going to fit for you.
Great. And then going over, this one I'll give to Tony. When should I start creating my roadmap to goal every year?
Yeah, so we recommend kind of a two-part process, an annual planning process and then an annual refresh. So for the annual planning, we would recommend at the beginning of the last quarter of your fiscal year. So if your fiscal year and calendar year are the same, that means the end of September or early October is a great time to start planning for the year ahead. And then with that annual refresh, this is the point of the refresh is to make any updates to your current fiscal year's plan after calendar year end giving. So again, if your fiscal year is a calendar year, then your annual refresh happens in February so that you can integrate any new year-end donors and downgrade donors who have been unresponsive.
This next one, I think I'll also give to Tony. So what are some of the best practices to help our CEO succeed at major gifts?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'd say having a dedicated portfolio for your CEO. So if they have the capacity to manage 5 to 15 major or principal donors, and then having the support structure in place to help them do the touch points. Likely they're not doing the touch points themselves, like somebody else is writing a script for the notes or making a list and handing it to your CEO so that they can make phone calls at certain times of the year. That's more like engaging them in acknowledgement and recognition of donors, which I do think is like the key part of this work. And then I would also, every time that you're bringing your CEO, well, every time you're having a meeting, definitely prep for it. If that meeting includes the CEO, I would have like a really dedicated prep meeting using a meeting plan template, which I'd be happy to talk with you more about so that you're really giving them some key talking points, helping them understand what the ask is, how you're planning to make that ask with that donor, really everything that you can do to help them really understand what you expect of them and their role in those meetings have been hugely important. And then I'd say on the flip side is helping your team understand when and how to engage your CEO in major gift fundraising. So if you're tapping your CEO for every like $1,000 or $5,000 donor, depending on the size of your organization, that might not and likely isn't the best use of their time. So helping your team understand what some of the criteria are in place for engaging your CEO in major gift relationships is also really helpful to have some best practices or SOPs in place for that.
The next one I'll give over to Kelly, and then Tony, if there's anything you want to add. So how can I make sure that my team is working their plans?
I can share from a data perspective on this. With all of the asks or opportunities and actions like we were talking about before in the CRM in real time, knowing that they're making sure everything is updated, you should have access to see the progress that they're making using reports and dashboards. It really depends on the CRM that you're utilizing. It's going to differ what those reports and dashboards look like, but ultimately, if the data is not in the CRM, then it didn't happen. So if your team is not inputting data, they're not being held accountable, it's going to look like they are not working their plans. This is a full circle engagement. If you take anything away from what I'm sharing, this is it. If it's not in the CRM, it didn't happen. Your data is what drives your progress. So if there is an interaction or a note that's not in your database, that is inherently a loss. Tony, not sure if you would add anything to that.
The only thing that I would add is having some kind of metrics management framework. So we didn't really dig into this today, but if you have questions about it, I'd be happy to have a conversation. So knowing what the metrics that you're tracking are in terms of that outreach, and your CRM can help you do that. But if you're holding your team accountable for number of emails sent or number of phone calls made or number of meetings completed, then having those conversations and a like template agenda for a weekly one-on-one conversations is also really helpful to make sure that they're not falling behind on their goals, that they're doing the work to make sure that you achieve that goal.
Great. And then I'll do one last short question that came through for you, Kelly. Should a virtual assistant be trusted to do some of the work for one-person shops?
Assuming that means the data entry piece of it, it depends. It's absolutely possible. I want to know how many hours is this person committing? I want them to really feel embedded as a member of your team. And I don't want to take away the responsibility from the portfolio holders because they need to be so in tune with what is happening with all of their donors. That said, if your volume is completely over the top, and I know this is for a one-person shop, absolutely get some support. That person will be your right hand and there with you. So I think it's possible they can be trusted. Of course, it depends on the person and what that relationship ultimately looks like. It's possible.
And then we did have one quick last question that came in that brings us into our final remarks. And it's, are there any other sessions about fundraising planned in the future? So excited to hear some of the enthusiasm for this series. So as we mentioned, this is the last part of this summer session series. By participating in today, you all have been included in our marketing distribution emails. So stay tuned to those emails to keep an eye out on future events and webinars just like this as they're announced. So with that, I'll bring us to our final remarks. So first of all, thank you so much to Kelly and Tony, our facilitators, for today's conversation and the previous two. And I want to thank everyone who has taken time out of their day to join these conversations as well. So as I mentioned at the top of the hour, we will be sharing a recording of today's webinar alongside links to recordings of the previous webinars, as well as a Path to Goal spreadsheet template, all by the end of this week. And we're also happy to set up any 30-minute consultations with attendees to go over any additional questions. We'll have a link in that those emails that we send out to allow you all to sign up for those meetings. So thank you so much again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.